So let's continue with Kierkegaard. Hopefully you guys did the reading. We'll get to it in time. He was described as anti-metaphysician. Remember, metaphysics is the theory of ultimate reality. What is ultimately real? And he doesn't seem to worry about that. He does not try to build any kind of system, didn't believe we can even have this kind of logical, speculative knowledge of reality. He gave many reasons why he thought it was impossible. One of them is, of course, reality is changing, but the other reason is we are changing. We're not standing in one place, so to try for us to have this completely correct picture of reality is impossible. The way you look at reality today may be completely different from the way you will be looking at it 10 years from now or 20 years from now. So that is why you can't even do that until you are alive. And after you are dead, well, you obviously can't do it either. So you never can do it. While you're alive, things constantly change, and when you are dead, you're no longer there to do it. So for Kierkegaard, Hegel in particular, with his magnificent system, was really on a wrong track. He said this, he said, if Hegel had written his whole logic and written it in the preface that it was only a thought experiment, he undoubtedly would have been the greatest thinker who has ever lived. But as it is comic. So basically he's saying, yeah, like as one possibility, Hegel's system is interesting. But how is he so sure that is how things really are? It seems like, again, if you look at other philosophers, they had other systems which are different from him, and they also are sure their systems are the reality, so it doesn't seem like that makes very much sense. So this is the biggest criticism of Hegel. For one thing, he thought Hegel's system is too abstract. Nothing in it speaks to the concrete issues the individuals face in their own lives. And the other thing is, while we can have a timeless logical system that is complete and finished, it's impossible for there to be logical existential system, for our existence is still ongoing. You can't just put it into some kind of simple framework of a system. Now, whether or not his criticism of Hegel is correct is actually a big question, because most Hegel scholars think he is not really criticizing Hegel. Like when he says he criticizes Hegel, it seems like it's a slightly different philosopher than Hegel. So sometimes people, when they talk about it, they even put Hegel in quotes. Why? Well, there's two possibilities. One possibility is maybe he didn't even did it deliberately, right? He didn't want to criticize Hegel himself. It was more convenient for his purposes to invent slightly different version of Hegel and criticize it. Or maybe he simply misunderstood Hegel, which is also possible. He thinks that he did understand Hegel. Hegel is notoriously difficult. It's hard to say how well did Kierkegaard understand him, because there are many subtleties which he seemed to be missing there. But nonetheless, some of his criticism is correct. At least some of it is on the money. And here's what he says. Looking for guidance from Hegel's philosophy, how to live your life, would be like traveling in Denmark with the help of a small map of Europe on which Denmark shows no larger than a steel pen point. It's even more impossible. So basically that's a metaphor he is trying to present. Like if you have Hegel's system, it's like a map of Europe, right? Imagine like the map of Europe where Denmark is like this small. And then you are in Denmark and you need to get from place to place. Would that be very helpful? No. So that's what he's trying to say for our life. How do I, as an individual, live my life if I use the Hegel system? And he thinks that's not helpful at all, because I would not know how to behave in my own life. In some of Hegel's work, this is definitely true, because when he talks about history, in particular, the individual role in history, according to Hegel, is not very big. Even the major individuals like Napoleon or Hitler, they are just playing their role because this is basically what the spirit has kind of required of them. But little people like us don't play any role in that. We are just like drops in an ocean, right? However, the other parts of his philosophy do, of course, give you some guidance about how to live your life, and Kierkegaard seemed to be just ignoring that. Well, anyway, he has his points, like I said. So what is existence? What did Kierkegaard himself think on the subject? For him, the word existence, when applied to human beings, implies the process of realizing what it means to be self through personal choices. Everything you choose in life is your attempt to become yourself. He doesn't think we are ourselves when we are born. We're really like clean slate. But then when we live our life, we may or may not become ourselves. And most people don't. So while he thinks for Hegel the goal of human life is to rise above particularity in the direction of greater universality, kind of merge yourself with the spirit, for Kierkegaard the universal is the abstract and empty, and the particular is the only thing which matters. The more you approach the description of a human being in general, the more you shed distinctiveness of the unique existence which we have. And that means passion. You need passion. Remember, passion is a key word for Kierkegaard. Deep within us, eternity and the infinite, that is in tension with the weight of finite earthly time bound. If we experience this tension, we will know what it means to exist passionately. So this is the good quote. It is impossible to exist without passion unless we understand the word exist in a loose sense of so-called existence. And it is just this that what it means to exist, if one is to become conscious of it. This is a good metaphor. He says, eternity is a winged horse, infinitely fast, and time is a worn-out jade. The existing individual is the driver. Right? So while we are in this life, we are driving it. But it is limited in time. So we have to use our time with the most efficiency. We should grab the reins of life. The person who doesn't do that misses out on the most important thing. So only the person who grabs the reins and struggles with the decisive choices in his own life can be said to exist in the fullest sense of the word. And there's another good quote. He says, he is such a driver when his mode of existence is not existence loosely so called, for then he is no driver but a drunken peasant who lies asleep in the wagon and lets the horses take care of themselves. So if you are not taking control of your life, if you are not passionate about your life, and you just go with the flow, you are like this drunken peasant who is, instead of controlling the horses, just lays there and the horses take him wherever they want to go, rather than wherever you want to go. And the key words here are anxiety, fear, and trembling. So achieving existence is a task to be accomplished with a great deal of anxiety. You cannot escape anxiety, fear, and trembling. All about me are forces that would pull me away from authenticity and anesthetize me to my own existence. Anesthetic just basically means something which dulls your feelings, right? The medical doctors use anesthetics when they want to cut you or something, and they don't want you to feel pain. So you should feel pain. That's part of life. This is an essential part of life. And take risks and feel anxiety. Anxiety, actually, for existentialists, is a very important word. Why? Because they explain that that's how we know that we have freedom. When you feel anxiety, you know that you can do whatever you want. One of the interesting examples there is, for example, if you're standing right next to the edge somewhere, right on the mountain or something, and you feel this anxiety that you could jump if you wanted to, but of course you don't want to. But that feeling itself is there. Like if I wanted to, I could jump. Right? And that tells you that you are free to do whatever you want. It would not make any sense for you whatsoever to jump, but you could. And humans are indeed very strange in this sense, because we can do these kinds of things just to find out what are the limits of our freedom. There's actually even a movie about that, how, what is it called? Anyway, it's a Dutch movie. The guy was a father of a family guy, very nice, and one day he was just wondering to himself, am I really like that kind of a nice person? Or could I do something evil? So in order to test it, he decided to do something evil. He kidnapped this woman and buried her alive. And that was to him just an exercise to prove to himself that he is free to do whatever he wants, and he cannot is not locked into being this nice person. So the movie is kind of interesting. I'm not going to tell you the whole movie, but that's the key point in this movie, right? We are capable of that, all of us. Of course, we shouldn't do it. God forbid. That is a really evil, stupid thing to do. But in the movie, he just did it to prove to himself that he can. And he did it, and he could. So, the vanishing, that's what the movie is called. There's actually an American version which was later made, but the original Dutch is much better. Why? Because it doesn't have a happy ending. The American one has a happy ending, which is a little silly. But the Dutch one doesn't. So what, do you want me to tell you? If you ever watch the movie, it would be a spoiler. But so the movie starts a girl and a boy traveling, right? They are in a car traveling through Holland, and then they stop at the gas station. The girl goes away and never comes back. The guy just waits for her, and she never comes back. So he goes to the police, and the police well, I don't know, did you quarrel? They are not very eager to start investigation. He tried to do something himself. So years go by. He spends years trying to find her. He's on TV all the time and so on. Then he gets a letter from someone. So basically, he meets with this guy, and the guy tells him, I can tell you, but you have to drink this whatever he was giving him, and then you will find out. So this guy faced with two choices: either to drink whatever he is giving him and then he'll find out, or not to drink it and then he will never find out. And he's like, oh, I'll take you to the police. And and so what? I never admitted doing anything. I have no connection to anything. So eventually he does drink it, and then he wakes up buried alive, basically. And so the guy was that father, right? He buried her alive, and he wrote him a letter, and then when he met him, gave him some sort of sleeping pill, and when he fell asleep, he buried him alive too. So that's how the movie ends. The movie ends with him waking up underneath the ground, buried alive. He turns on his lighter and and that's it. In the American version, they actually find him, dig him up, and he is okay. But that is a little, I don't know. But the original Dutch version, they never find him. He's just there. Okay, so that's the point he is trying to make, that this is what tells us that we are alive, and we have all these choices. And through these choices, only through these choices, we can become ourselves. Remember again the example with 3 doors. That's what you constantly face in life. let's say you got these three choices: becoming a lawyer, musician, philosopher. Well, that's when you become yourself, right? That's what's your life gonna be. You can take the easy road, just listen to your parents or something and do what they want you to do. But then what maybe is the problem? You will discover that actually, yeah, you have all the money or something, but you hate this occupation. You don't want to do that. That is not who you are. And that is the hardest thing in life, because it's so easy to just let others decide for you, or flip a coin, let the coin decide for you. What is hard is to decide yourself, because you can also make a mistake, right? And then what happens? Then you will blame yourself for it. It's so much easier to blame your parents or a coin or something, right? If somebody else decides it for you, well, they are to blame. If you decide it, well, then there's nobody else to blame. But that's how you really become yourself in life. So he, if you have to describe him as a system, he does have this three stages or spheres in life's way. He talks about it sometimes. So he thinks that this is the three spheres: aesthetic, ethical, and religious. And they are kind of like overlapping circles. Most people, actually, he says, are in the aesthetic stage. And they stuck in it and they never leave. So you can think about it as a big circle, the aesthetic. Why does he call it the aesthetic? Aesthesis in Greek actually means the feeling. So it's related to the feelings. So unlike Hegel, even though it is a little similar to what you see in Hegel's phenomenology, right? Hegel also thought that in phenomenology, remember, the reader goes through the stages as you read the book. And it also is the stages people go through in their life. And similarly, society goes through these stages of self-understanding as society develops. Now, for Kierkegaard, only people can do it. It's not applicable to societies. Societies do not go through this. He does not think about it in terms of like some sort of grand narrative. But people can. However, it also is not a logical necessity, because most people are just stuck in this aesthetic one. They never even leave it. So what exactly is the aesthetic one? So in either or, that actually is described. Okay, before we talk about what is aesthetic, how does one move from one stage to the other? When the person reaches the state of despair, you're no longer satisfied with life as it is. And then that state of despair may force you to a passionate choice of a different stage. So eventually the goal is to become fully developed self. First stage, aesthetic, is the least helpful in this way. What is aesthetic stage? So it is related to the senses, sensual pleasures. You are seeking pleasure in everything. Pleasure in food, pleasure in music, pleasure in your relationship with other people. You're trying to basically satisfy yourself, right? You divide everything into boring and interesting. If it's interesting, you want to do it. If it's boring, you don't want to do it. If you rephrase the cards, I think, therefore I am, you can call it, I have interesting moments, therefore I am. So as long as my life is interesting, that is all that matters. And the biggest problem in this stage is boredom. You fight in the boredom. Boredom is the root of all evil. It has two weapons against you, and they have pretty good weapons. One, transitory nature of all experiences, right? No matter how much you enjoy something, it will end at some point. Have you seen, like, if it's a really great movie, you don't want it to end, but it will end. And then you will look for another great movie, and then you'll find it and watch it, and then it will end too. And if it's a great series or something, like, oh, you don't even want it to end, but you have to watch it, and then it ends. And then hopefully there's new season, and then maybe it's not as good as the previous one, but hopefully it is. And it will also end. Everything ends. And the repetition, like too much of the same thing, even if it's a great thing, is not as pleasant as the first time. And we all know this, no matter how much you enjoy something, it is so great first time. Second time, not as great. Third time, even less great. If you keep on repeating it, you will eventually reach the point when it becomes boring. And this is something which most people experience. Like I said, actually most people, he thinks, are stuck in this stage and they never leave it their entire life. But the next stage is ethical. And ethical stage is a little different. So in either or, the aesthetic stage is described by this guy who was constantly chasing pleasures, and at some point he had a romance with a woman and so on. Aesthetic is the second part there. Ethical. Ethical is the second part, and that is represented by the judge who criticizes him and says, hey, you have to commit to something. You have to find a place in life when you are more than just chasing pleasure. For example, to become a husband, to marry, to become a father, right? So this moral choices which people make, and then you will have something more lasting and more personal. Because if you are a father, you actually have some lasting relationship compared to just chasing pleasure after pleasure. Some people never get there, but some people do. And that is a higher stage, because here you finally start to develop real personality. What's your personality if all you do is just enjoy whatever it is, music, food, so on? Nothing. But if you are a good father, that is already something of a personality. So morality only appears at this stage. And then morality becomes important, because what does it mean to be a good father? What does it mean to have passion and commitment of some sort? So dichotomy is a good, bad. Good, bad in a moral sense, no longer in terms of pleasure, right? It's not that it gives you pleasure to be a good father, but you are thinking of it as, what does it mean to be a good father? The judge, of course, also brings religion here. To him, religion is closely connected to ethical, because this is like what most people think, right? There are commandments. You're supposed to follow all these ethical laws given to us by God. But to Kierkegaard, religious is a different stage, and it actually is higher stage. And they are overlapping circles in a sense that are like this. They do not reject each other. If you're in ethical stage, doesn't mean you should forget all pleasure. Right? We all enjoy pleasure. It would be crazy for somebody to just be a good father and not enjoy anything at all. And I no longer want a good meal. You still want a good meal. It's just that you also have this relationship. But religious is the highest stage, which also includes ethical and aesthetic, but it's higher than they are. And why would people ever reach this religious stage? Well, despair again. They become desperate in terms of like, well, I am a good father, but there are many good fathers. I may be a good husband, but there are many good husbands. What is special about me? Where am I here? How does it make my existence different from all these other people? What does it actually mean to be truly religious? So the true individualism in this stage is still missing, an ethical stage. And religious stage is the highest stage an individual can achieve. But how can you achieve it? Well, that is a leap. You need to take this certain leap, first of all, in terms of faith, because this is where you have relationship with God. True relationship with God, this is actually where the reading kind of comes in. The more conception of God, the more self. The more self, the more conception of God. This is what he says about it. So remember that if a church doesn't give you really personal relationship with God because it's an institution. People go there mainly for social reasons, right? In fact, most people do that for social reasons, just to meet other people, to find something in common with them, and so on. But relationship with God can only be one-on-one. It's a personal relationship, and we all have it. Because remember, he thought that you have to look inside yourself to find it, because God is inside yourself. God is not all these other people you meet everywhere. That for Hegel, that was more of a real God, but not for Kierkegaard. So why is relationship with God so important? Because only when you are in front of God, the relationship with God, you are honest with yourself. Why? Well, would you lie to God? Do you think, if you imagine you really are talking to God, would you lie to him about your feelings or what you want in life? No. Why would you? I mean, he can see right through you. So this is where you would be honest with yourself, first of all. Because in that, you will not be posing. You will not be making anything up. You will honestly then have understanding of who you are. And if there is nothing there to understand, if you still don't have a personality, you would understand that too. So Fear and Trembling in particular, that book where the reading was from, remember I told you that he starts with the Abraham and Isaac and that whole story to understand faith. In fact, when the book starts, he starts talking about Hegel at first and about how many people want to go above faith. Like they think they have to supersede faith. And he says, I don't know how you can supersede faith because I don't even know what faith is. I haven't reached this stage. True faith. And then he tries to, on an example of this story of Abraham and Isaac, to understand what is a true faith. What exactly is it? And he says, look at this guy, Abraham. He had, Abraham and Sarah waited for, according to the Bible, 90 years, and they wanted to have a son, and they didn't have a son. Then God gives him a son. Sarah suddenly, 90 years old, becomes pregnant. She has a son. He loves him dearly. And then God tells him, okay, you have to sacrifice your son. You have to show me that you love me. So Abraham, without second thought, takes his son, takes him to this Mount Moriah, and is about to sacrifice him. And then the ram appears, and that is a message from God that you should not do it. Basically, the idea is that you've proven to me that you love me. You don't need to sacrifice your son to do that. Your willingness to do it was enough. So Kierkegaard just talks about this story as in, like, imagine yourself in Abraham's shoes. How much do you need to believe in God to actually do that? Right? Because when God told him to sacrifice his son, he didn't try to beg God and say, oh God, can you please change your mind? He didn't try to question that, like, why would I do it? So this is where he superseded the ethical, because the ethical stage, right? The understanding of the ethical is that we should be a good father. We should not sacrifice our children. But here God tells him to do it. And God is above ethical, because God is what sets all these laws. And since God told him that he has to sacrifice his son, he immediately stepped away from his role of the father in order to do what God wanted him to do. And Kierkegaard, honestly, well, speaking as a Hannes de Silencio, but I guess we can say it is Kierkegaard himself, says, I don't understand it. I have no idea what exactly, how to do it. So let's talk about the reading. For those of you who did that, what's the story with the princess? How does it fit into this whole thing? What's with the princess? Right from the beginning, what's the story? Yeah.
There's a knight, and then...
Well, he's not a knight first, right? He is what? just a young man. He starts calling him a knight later. He's a young man, and
like he talks about faith, and then I don't remember the other one, but the knight has faith, and then I feel like it's
no, it's further on. It starts with a much simpler story. He tries to put it in simple terms, which all of you guys could understand. So he starts by saying, there is a young man, he's in love with a princess. And everybody tells him, that is stupid. She is a princess and you are nobody. Look at the brewer's daughter. She's a much better fit for you. But he loves her. He can't help it. Right? So he dedicates his entire life to be with her. But can he get her? No, she's a princess. So that's the night of infinite resignation. He says the night of infinite resignation, he becomes a night of infinite resignation when he resigns to that and says, I know I can never have her, and despite that I will still love her and dedicate my entire life to her. He says, I can understand that. But then he says, there's another leap you can take, another step, and that is the night of faith. And the difference between the night of infinite resignation and the night of faith is what? Did anybody get to that point? It's like 3-4 pages down. You have to read it carefully. That is such a good story. So the night of faith would say, and yet I believe that I will get her by the power of the absurd. And he says, this is something I don't understand, and I can't do it, because this is absurd. But this is the true faith. So this is just as amazing as with Abraham and Isaac, because Abraham had no reason to believe that God will save his son. He says if he believed when he was taking his son that God will somehow change his mind, then the whole story is fake. What's the point of that? It's just a show. It's like, yeah, let's go, I'll sacrifice you. Okay, God, are you changed in your mind already? Tell me. But no, he actually believed he will sacrifice his son, and at the same time, he believed he will not, because God somehow will stop that. And both of it at the same time, which is amazing. So similarly, the story with the princess, when the young man resigns and thinks, I will never get her, and he truly believes it's impossible, I cannot marry a princess, that is insane. Then he's a knight of infinite resignation. But when in addition to that he tells himself, but I believe somehow it will still happen, that's when he's a knight of faith. Anyway, so that's his point there. The Abraham story illustrates the difference between the night of faith and the night of infinite resignation. The person of faith is not related to God by morality. Being a good father, being a good husband, that's not your relation to God. That is just a religious institution. Relation to God is a lot more personal, and in that sense, it is truly amazing. For the person who is a knight of faith, the entire world is like children's game. Whatever we do, he would do the same things, or she, but would not be, it wouldn't mean as much for them, because they have this higher understanding of reality and of God. Their understanding and commitments are a lot more related to God personally than to any of the other people. So the three-sphere existence spheres are not like separate circles. They are actually overlapping. The knight of faith would be part of their society, would enjoy a good meal, would have like a relationship with wife and children and so on. But they would be above all that. But the more important point, why is he talking about this being absurd, have this faith? Well, the Christianity itself, like people frequently don't think about it, but Kierkegaard puts it up in a very blatant way. Like if you look at Christianity, is it a reasonable story? Does anything there again strikes you as being a little bit absurd? Like, remember the story? Jesus Christ was crucified. He's the Son of God. He was crucified and then he came back to life. Is this a believable story? Does it make you as a, like it could really happen? No, clearly, like the whole story seems absurd. And that's the word. Because for one thing, how is he a son of God? What does it even mean? God just had a son on the side or something? On the other hand, also, how could he come back to life? Have you ever seen anybody to come back to life? Like there is a physical body. If it is destroyed, can it just somehow go? So the whole story is absurd. But he says, well, that's the catch. You have to believe in it anyway. You have to actually believe this stuff, not to pretend, not to go to church like a couple of hours a week, just so it's some priest, blah, 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 some boring stuff, and you are just sitting there thinking about fun stuff which you will do after church. No, you really have to commit to the whole thing. And that is very, very hard, and that's why he says, I can't even do it, and very few people can. But if you can, then you have faith. And that's what true faith is. So, it's important to understand. He says, faith is a crucifixion of understanding. That's what he calls. For the absurd is the object of faith, and the only object that can be believed. Christianity has declared itself to be the eternal essential truth which has come into being in time. It has proclaimed itself as a paradox, and it has required that the individual, the inwardness of faith in relation to that which stems itself as absurdity to understand it. So that is his whole point there, and with Abraham too. He says you actually have to commit to this thing and to really believe in it despite the fact that it is totally absurd. You have to believe that there is indeed life after death, there is this eternal life and so on. You have to believe everything, and that means relinquishing understanding and thinking, and to keep the soul fixed on the absurd. You will never have proof of it. Remember we talked about it last time. You can't have a proof of God. You can't have proof of the afterlife. You have to just believe despite everything. And that's the hardest part. And few people do that. Most people just play. They pretend like they're good Christians. They, every once in a while when they want to win a lottery or something, they pray to God. Because, I mean, who else are you going to pray? But that is not faith. That's the questions we can ask about his philosophy too. And as you will see, we'll next week talk about Nietzsche. Nietzsche is also considered the existentialist, but with one important difference. He is very anti-Christian, and he is totally against this idea of God. So everything else is almost exactly the same, except the conclusion. He says there's no God. But how do you live then? Because you still have to exist, and you still have to be yourself, and you still have to make your life. But if there is no God, what do you do then? It's even more difficult than the problem Kierkegaard seemed to be suggesting. Because then the question is, well, who do you become? How can you, like for Kierkegaard, the goal is to understand God. Right? As hard as it is, it's easier than to find meaning in life if there is no God. And to find yourself. Like, what should you do then? Because the whole thing again seems to be collapsing back into aesthetic, which is how most people live. Like, if there is no God, nothing, well, I may as well have fun. YOLO, right? But there is a problem with that too, because then it's like this boredom and like never satisfied, and they have like 5 marriages, all of them failed, and so on. And that is what most people have. And then in the end of life, they are disappointed with the whole story. So Christianity does have certain story too, right? Christianity tells us that all these things really happened, and it does seem to be an important part of the story. So when he says that whether you pray to the idol or whether you pray to the true God, it doesn't matter, well, it does seem like if you're Christian, it matters. You still have to believe that this story really did take place. And how do you do that? Because it seems like if you approach it from his point of view, you can believe almost anything. Why not believe that, I don't know, this table is God? As long as you do it passionately and like commit your life to it. But there seems to be something wrong with this approach then. Like, shouldn't there be some objective way to figure it out? What is this objective way? How can we figure it out? Or is it like, oh, this is God for me and for you, some other God is okay.